On the podcast today, we are going to speak about whether life is serious or not. And this is something that in the Eastern traditions they speak about a lot. And I even remember once Alan Watts saying in a lecture, is it serious? So is life really serious? Now, this is we're not denying that serious things happen, but how do we get to those situations in the first place? And usually it comes from a serious mindset, right? Like, because a lot of people who are emotionally triggered, who are quick to comment right now, are probably saying, what do you mean it's not serious? All of these things are happening and this and that. But it's the one who is serious that got us into that state in the first place.
Yeah, well, we do take life too serious when we become serious,
yes.
Isn't it? Like when we become serious, anything happens, you wouldn't take it as what it really is, right? We eclipse our vision with our seriousness to the actuality, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so again, it comes with a lot what's within our mind emotionally. As you mentioned, emotionally, if you're emotionally triggered, that means you're somewhat attached to that emotion for some reason.
Yep.
So then you need to start work on investigating why you become emotional at certain situations, and there must be a reason why you get triggered emotionally like that. So that, first of all, the work has to be done to look within ourselves and what happened to us to react in a certain way.
And you're basically taking it too seriously. That's the point, right? Like, if you are emotional about certain things, you're taking it too serious. If you're stressed about certain things, you're taking your life too seriously. And so the question that the East posed to us, is it really serious? So like we're under this assumption that especially human life is serious, right? Like, so human life is so serious. We're engaged in all of these things. We're worried about certain political situations, so forth and so on. We're creating division within humanity, and it's all based on this idea that it's serious. But if you look into the Eastern traditions, if you look into Hinduism, there's the idea of lila, the play, right? Like, life is a play, and it's about having fun, as Swami Satchidananda once said, when someone came to him who was very serious, and he said, life's about having fun. Like, what are you worried about all of these things? Like, it doesn't matter what the politicians say. They want you to be serious. It doesn't matter what your neighbors say. They want you to be serious. They all want you to buy into this illusion, of biting our fingernails together and fretting about certain life situations when it's not serious at all. And this goes into also Taoism, where in Taoism, Wu-Wei, in some senses, is also a level of playfulness. This effortlessness that we come in our life. Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi talk about this playfulness that we can have in life. But, if you fall into the Confucian mold, then you'll take life too serious. You'll sleep in certain postures. You'll bind your feet. You'll watch your P's and Q's, and life's a bit of a stress from that perspective.
And I think one of the core reasons why we take ourselves serious and our life serious is coming from level of insecurity. I think because we are insecure within ourselves, so that we are always somewhat nervous and anxious. So we are in a protected fashion, protected mode, so that we start taking things too serious, right? So there is that level of insecurity within ourselves, which makes us to be very serious. But at the same time, if we were to be able to be relaxed about the situation, and somewhat, if you can calm yourself down and have a somewhat the trust in things that it's going to work out eventually, then instantly your attitude towards the very situation or your circumstance become at ease. Like you are relaxed at the situation, so that in the end all things work out without any problem, really. That all problem that we took as serious was coming from our own imagination that's derived from our negativity biased way of thinking.
If you look at the way that we're all raised, so when we're kids, before we go to school, we know life's not serious. So we're out playing with our friends and climbing trees and, making fun of anything because life is fun. And then once the education process comes in and this whole socialization process is forged upon us, then we're told to worry about certain things, to attain certain goals. And then you begin to have this sort of solidified sense of identity, which, as you said, is inherently insecure. So it's constantly trying to protect itself in an environment where there's billions of other identities doing the same thing. And the identity itself is an illusion. It's something that was created through the socialization process, which then eclipses this sense of fun and, lack of seriousness because it's not serious. But we believe so much in our beliefs, yes, in what we think the reality is. And all this is an artificial conceptual framework that we superimpose on reality. And then we think it's serious. But then if you ask someone who is very serious about self-inquiry or meditation, and you tell them to peel those layers back of that artificial conceptual framework, then everything's all good. There is nothing serious. And that's the fact of the matter. And that's what makes people feel really uncomfortable, because they think, but shouldn't I worry about something? And it's like, no, why should you worry about anything? That's what your parents told you, that's what education told you, that's what the politicians are telling you. But you don't have to.
Again, the biggest problem there is that we're constantly educated and indoctrinated by school and in society not to be ourselves. I think that's the biggest problem. So that somewhat false identity comes from social conditioning, I think. So that whoever we think we are is based on social consumption and educational consumption, so that we kind of lose the sense to truly be ourselves. And when we become like authentic self and just not worrying about any circumstantial things and like that, then society or people somewhat mock you in a sense. That again condition you to be someone else than you truly are, right? So that makes you feel very uncomfortable to be your true self, being yourself. So again, that society molds you in a certain way not to be yourself brings that such serious attitude towards life.
That's right. And everyone's trying to pull you back into that serious reality.
Yes.
Don't let you be free. You can't be free, right? That's something that really annoys people. Because you and I, and probably a lot of people listening and watching, have had similar experiences, is that you and I for, let's say 13 years, have traveled, gallivanted around the world, did what we wanted to do, lived very minimal lifestyle. We don't have a lavish lifestyle, obviously, because you can't if you travel and so forth, unless you're a millionaire. And then we have a lot of friends or family and say, how can you do that? What about the future? What about, building a family and so forth and so on? This is the same conversation we constantly hear, right? Because it's serious to them. And I always say to them, so you want me to get a car loan, a mortgage, you want me to get in debt to make you feel comfortable because you're already in debt and you live that sort of life. I'm personally not interested. We are not interested in that sort of life. We don't live with debt, and we're not interested in ever having debt and having mortgages and so forth. Because then once you put yourself into that prickly situation, then life becomes serious, in air quotes. It's still not serious.
Yes.
But you've put yourself in that situation.
Yes, you put yourself under immense amount of stress and commitment that you don't want to do and things like that. And since you mentioned that our lifestyle that we've been living for well over 10 years, I remember that kind of triggered me this memory that I have when we were living in Seoul. We were in a subway going somewhere, and I think we were having a joke and something, and we were laughing about something, and so we were happy.
Yeah, of course.
But then people around us in the subway were just looking at us and in such contemptuous eyes and very hatred eyes. And again, like Korean society is very well known with the heavy conditioning by Confucian culture. So as if like we are not allowed to have a good time. You know,
how dare you be happy?
Yeah, that was the exact look that we had, and I felt like, oh, what's wrong with these people? You know, why are they so serious about we just having a joke, and what's wrong with that? Like, so that they are that serious about life. Having a joke itself is some sort of a sinful thing. I don't know. Right? That's, so that again, that is to show that, as you mentioned, your circumstance yourself make it to be too serious, and you kind of buy into that, and you live that life, and you end up looking someone else who are having a happy life as in like a bad thing, like how dare you enjoy your life, how dare you being happy, and things like that, which is kind of absurd.
We see that online a lot, right? We see a lot of people who are bitter and resentful to people who are living their best life. And just because they're not living their best life, they go out then trying to tear them down. And it's very common, right? Like, so it's definitely a psychological defect, a psychological flaw in those individuals. And they're not observant of their own shortcomings, their own lack of happiness. They're not aware that they're just taking life too seriously. And like coming back to Watts would just say to them, is it serious? Like, you have to unpack whether it's serious or not. And when you look at, like, because we're all under this assumption, right? This especially this Christian assumption that there's some sort of meaning to life, right? But when you look at it from the Eastern perspective, there's no meaning to life. Life is the meaning. Life, it has meaning, but it's the meaning that you give it.
Yes.
You know, it's through your own experiences and so forth and so on. But life inherently has no meaning. And like, if we look at it through the Christian lens, they're always telling you, you know, like, there's believers and non-believers, and this is the path, and so forth and so on. And then you build this whole illusionary framework in your mind of being serious, of thinking that you need to do something to attain this meaning of living and so forth. But it's all based on a cognitive error. It's false.
Yeah.
And life doesn't have any meaning at all. I mean, fundamentally,
yes.
Life is not a book.
Yeah.
It's not an analytical, conceptual framework that the mind comes up with. Life is life. It's just there. It's naked. It doesn't need us to give it an interpretation or an analytical perspective. That's just things that come through our mind. And that frightens a lot of people, right? Because especially when we look at like a lot of certain religious doctrines, a lot of religious doctrines in nature are political. They're not really spiritual. And so they're trying to forge this or superimpose this worldview onto nature. But nature is just doing its thing. Nature is stillness, is emptiness. And you can align with that. But we're told that we ought to be super serious. You need to believe in these certain things. But all of these things are part of this artificial conceptual framework. It's not nature as it truly is. They're concepts, they're beliefs. And we need to go beyond those to actually see reality as it truly is, to understand that it's not serious. You know, once you downregulate your sense of self, you know it's not serious. And life is like Swami Chidananda said, like, it's fun, it's playful. And, you know, some people don't know that and some people do, right? And that's why when we go to India, for example, India's a great example, right? Where we'll go to Delhi, for example, and there's a lot of business people in Delhi, but there's also sadhus still on the street, you know, and the sadhus having a great time, having a laugh. Maybe they're smoking a bit of bhang or something like this. Smoking a bit of hash, I should say, drinking a bit of bhang. And, you know, they're having a good time and just not taking life seriously. But in the same environment, there's stern businessmen and women walking past. Yes. And caught in their own mind, right? Caught in their own mind because they're too involved in the world.
Yes, that's right. I think our human life can be compared to a life of a tree.
Yeah.
I think. Again, us being overcomplicated makes our life very complicated as well. But when you see life of a tree. Let's say, what is the meaning of a tree? What is the meaning of we having trees in nature? Then, well, actually, there is no meaning to a tree. For example, that tree grows for decades, and when it's time to go, and it'll slowly die, and it'll become nothing, right? But while the tree is alive, it gives us a great shelter and creates great oxygen. It creates its own beauty. So that is, I think, the role of a tree in tree's life. And just like that, I think for us as well, for human being, we were born out of our own will, right? Nobody wanted to exist because we wanted to be born, right? That was out of our choice, and we were born without our not out of our will, and we live our life. And when it's time to move on, we will move on, and after that, we don't know what's next. So while we are alive, just like a tree, as you mentioned earlier, what meaning we give to life becomes what our life is, right?
Exactly.
So that, again, that comes down to our choice. Do we want to live a happy and prosperous life, or do we want to choose to have a very stressful, goal-oriented, very hard-headed, this kind of life?
Yeah, of course.
Which one do we want? So, I mean, the answer is pretty obvious. If you want to live a happy life, we know what steps that we need to take. We cannot be too serious about ourselves, first and foremost, and just take care of essential things and try to, have fun with life day to day. Again, another problem with that is that we tend to look too much into the future or looking too much back in the past. We lose a sense of being a complete present moment, I think. But I think the ultimate result, ultimate outcome of past or the future is here and now, I think. You are blueprint of your past, and also you will be blueprint of a future at here and now. So how you are at right this moment will determines how future will be and how past was. So how you become at this present moment, I think you can change the past memories too.
Yeah.
For example, whatever triggered a sad emotional state, whatever happened in the past, but if you change your attitude here and now, that can become completely different kind of memory. It can transform to different kind of emotion, right?
Yeah.
And not thinking too much ahead, just being here and now in a very content and a positive attitude will determine how you will be next minute, next moment, next day, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, you have to work on those past impressions, like those samskaras, right? Like, because that's making you take life too serious. So your immediate moment, the present moment, is distorted because of the past, which will distort the future. So you're living, most people live in their past memories, right? Like, so they live in the present reality, and they think that the present reality is just like the past memories they had. But they're not. They're all different situations. There may be certain similarities, right? That's why we have experiences of deja vu and so forth and so on. But the fact of the matter is that the present moment is not related to the past. It's its own thing. And so if you start to work on yourself spiritually and you start to cleanse out your samskaras, your subliminal imprints and mental impressions, then you'll start to experience a joy in the present moment that is always there, but we suffer because of our past experiences. So it's eclipsed. And because we suffer from our past experiences, then we take life too seriously, right? And so when you use the tree as an analogy, like you said, the tree just naturally gives off oxygen and this and that. A human naturally gives off joy. But you know why we don't experience that? Because we're caught in past impressions. We're caught in a socialization process that we've been indoctrinated with, which distorts our present moment awareness, right? So Buddha, when he was explaining his teachings, was saying all life is suffering when you're a person, when you're this identity that you've sold the house on, right? You believe it's serious, you believe it's who you are Guy Young, I'm Jason, that's all we are, forever.
Full stop.
Full stop. And so from that individual state of consciousness, suffering is inherent. But as Buddha goes through his teachings, it's a deprogramming process to experience nirvana, to experience joy. But it's through blowing the candle out, it's through blowing the identity out, which includes taking away or eliminating, in some sense, past impressions, past memories that distort your present moment awareness.
That's exactly what total freedom that Jiddu Krishnamurti was talking about. That total freedom, like real freedom, being free from your past memory,
Yep.
past memories, past emotions that triggers you until today. Like again, the storehouse consciousness, which is samskaras, that once we can be free from all those samskaras that we kind of stored within ourselves, then that's when the total freedom, the true freedom comes into place, right? And again, that's, for some people it'll take lifetime, for some people it won't take that long. Depends on how rigorously that you want to work on yourself, right? So really look within memories which triggered initial traumatic reaction to you, and look into it, and then somewhat analyze a little bit what kind of personality you have now because of that incident, for example, right? And this process can really help you to be free from that emotional reaction. The experience itself had happened. We can't change it, right? But we can change our reaction to that, right?
Yeah.
That's the change that we need to make.
And to be honest, it shouldn't take a lifetime. I mean, it shouldn't. If you're really sincere and honest about what we talk about every week on this podcast, it shouldn't take you a long lifetime. You should be engaged in inquiry, you should be engaged in spiritual practices, contemplative thought, and a lot of people make excuses. Oh, what about my kids? What about my job? And this and that. You're making up excuses to not get engaged in the spiritual work. So you're taking those things seriously, but you're not taking your spiritual practice seriously. It's ironic, right?
Yeah.
Like, so that which frees you, you're not taking seriously. That which binds you, you take head on serious. So I've heard many teachers before say that people feel uncomfortable when they give away their suffering. It makes them feel uncomfortable. They feel as if they should suffer. We have this sort of psychosis now, where we feel we should suffer our experiencing, So, like
we should be very stressful.
Yeah.
And almost in that psychology, we almost feel that, I don't know, purpose or meaning or existential reason from having that sort of,
Mooji said it best once when he said, do you experience suffering or do you suffer your experiencing?
Yeah.
Do you see? So people are suffering their experiencing. They're not experiencing suffering. So that's why they don't live with joy. They're too bound up in their own mind, their own projections of the world, their beliefs, their concepts, and so forth and so on. And we suffer that experiencing because we are so solidified as this conditioned identity. And that's how we see the world. We see the world through rose-colored glasses. And then we take life serious because what happens? Life doesn't accord to your beliefs, your conceptual framework, and then you get very angry, very agitated. Then you get invested in changing people so they see that the reality your way. It's the birth of a tyrant, right? The birth of a tyrant is from that very subtle attraction to their own personal agenda. And we all have that. I mean, on the spiritual path, you're trying to get rid of that.
Is there something like, instead of you trying to change yourself, you're trying to change everything outside of yourself?
Yeah.
That's
what people are doing every day.
Yeah.
To accord with their own personal agenda, their own personal bias of the world.
Yeah, to justify what they think is right,
Yes.
and what they do is correct. And
Instead of following the Eastern way of just allowing nature to run its course and to do its thing, right? So that's the subtle birth of a tyrant, and it's concerning because most people have that seed within them. Look online, right? People are arguing all day over frivolous things, but it's just their own personal agenda that they're trying to superimpose on someone else and trying to get them to believe a certain way.
I think because nowadays, because of the social media, this online world gives you the false idea of how powerful individuals are, I think. It's a false idea and very unhealthy idea, I think. Because people very often misbehave on the online world and act as if whatever they say is always right, and they attack other people who think otherwise, right? And that gives people some sort of voice, and you have a right to be yourself, in air quote, yourself, and that leads to misbehavior. This is very unhealthy in the false, because that doesn't get exercised in the physical world, right? But let's say without internet or all these things, let's be back to like 30 years or something like that. Because I believe the society was a lot healthier, because people have this idea of individual freedom and right, as well as respecting others' freedom and right as well. This is how it should be exercised. And this gives people, online world gives people this false idea of what freedom is. And again, that makes other people's freedom under attack, and that leads to, again, more seriousness, more separation, more rules. And
well, that's a psychosis, isn't it? That people think that they have a say in the online world, right? And as you said, like if you go back 30 years ago, 25 years ago, the only BS you used to have to listen to was the media back then. Now the BS you have to listen to is the media plus social media, from people who are constantly trying to attack people. And as you said, it was much more pure before the internet, because people's interactions were in the physical world. So you had to behave yourself, otherwise you'd get a black eye. That's just a fact of the matter. But now there are, unfortunately, a lot of spineless people who hide behind the computer and, say many mean things to many people, which unfortunately has led to people committing suicide and this and that. And again, they just walk away scot-free, right? So, and that's a real shame. A real shame that people can treat people like that. Again, and that's because they take life too seriously. They're taking life so seriously, they're trying to superimpose their own worldview onto other people. And your worldview is not the worldview. It's a worldview. There is many a worldviews. There's billions of those, but it's not the worldview.
Exactly.
The fundamental reality is naked. It's devoid of conceptual frameworks, of linguistic frameworks, of any sort of artificiality that we've created through the human mind. And when you understand that, then that frees you to be a lot more playful and experience the beauty of life without your perspective of how it should be, right? Like it's like that time Watts met the Guru, and the Guru saw the guy going down the street like this, and he said, "She was coming off funny today, isn't it?" I know I've said that many times, but it's a good point, because from the Guru's perspective, it's all Shiva and it's all just Leela. It's the play. It's fun. To Watts, he saw this madman running down the street. You know what I mean? Like doing all these things, but to the Guru, it was like, coming on funny today. So.
Our ever desire to control things, again, that came with a lot of technological advancement, and also like increasing convenience of life. And we find it much easier to control certain things in our life, so that makes, I think, life a lot more serious. And because you want to control things, that even that things that you can't control, for example, right? So that gives such seriousness towards life, towards the world. But as you mentioned, somewhere like India, how many festivals there are in India when you look at it? Like at least once every month, right? That is for people to celebrate the sacredcy of life.
Yeah.
And that comes from the understanding that such important value of having life as a human being, and that is to celebrate for all of us, right? That's why when we go out on just random days in Delhi, Varanasi, or these places, just again, it's not any special day, but everyone go out and party and dancing, and they share good time.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So there is that good quality and element that we can learn from Indian culture.
Yeah, that frightens a lot of, especially particularly Western cultures, because when people go to India, life is a celebration. You know, you and I many times have seen that. Like if, for example, we'd go, obviously, on a daily walk every day in Tiruvannamalai, and there'd just be a random puja on the side of the street for they're renting a new property, so they're having a puja at the front, and we join the puja, and it's all just like, this is just every day.
Yes.
And for other people, it's like, what are they doing? It's like, oh, they're just having a puja. That's what happens. Like, it's India. Or we're in Varanasi, and people, they'd be dancing crazy. There's some music going on, and people are like, whoa, what's happening?
Outrageously crazy movement of body.
But it's a celebration of life, right? That's why there's so many festivals. I mean, everything has been turned into something sacred in India, and that's the beautiful thing about it. And that's what we miss in the rest of the world. We miss that sort of quality of playfulness, because they understand that Maya is an illusion. Maya, this physical reality, this reality of distinction, is a superficial covering on the ultimate reality of Brahman. And so when you understand that, it's not that serious then. If you truly understand that, you know, you don't just understand that intellectually, but it's a felt experience. So, and not saying that all Indians understand that, but there are a lot of Indians, particularly, you know, in rural India, that truly understand it, because they live on a very, you know, minimal financial level and so forth and so on. They don't really have like a glamorous lifestyle, which actually in some sense is beneficial for them, as opposed to someone in Mumbai who's filthy rich and they think they're a king, and you know.
I think another thing about India and Indian people is that when you give your life to something bigger meaning than yourself, I think you have instantly get to have this at ease kind of mind towards your own life, I think. Because again, from doing so, you don't take yourself too seriously, because you know what the bigger meaning in life is, right? The being merged with Brahman. Yeah. And to be able to do that, you constantly clean out your plate, your inner world. So from being that way, you no longer take life too serious. The reason why in the West or modern world people take themselves too serious is because they have too much of a goal-oriented, achievement-oriented mind. That's why instantly life becomes too much of a stress and too serious.
Yeah.
Like, let's say, for example, you didn't pass certain tests to become something or to achieve something, then you really become very harsh to yourself, and you take it very bad and things like that, and things become too serious. But if you have a somewhat bigger perspective in life, then you instantly think that my life actually doesn't mean much in billions of years of planetary history. Really.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
We have not even a speck of the dust. It's just the human life always kind of comes and goes, somewhat recycling itself, right?
Yeah.
So that as a sense of I, as an ego, as a person, really doesn't have any meaning.
No. It's a construct.
Yes.
And a practice, before we end this up, the practice that Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj would talk about to kind of get you out of this seriousness, right? This egocentric worldview or anthropocentric worldview that we build for ourselves is it's kind of a way of referring to yourself in the third person. So what you start to do is you refer to yourself in the third person for a certain allotted time, and what you do, or what happens with this practice is you continually distance yourself from your persona. So you're constantly distancing yourself from persona, and that allows you it frees you from the concerns that persona has about the world,
Right.
and allows you to experience the world in its naked state. And so for a lot of people that may seem odd. Obviously, I don't want you to go to work and start talking to yourself about yourself in the third person, but it's more about thinking about yourself in the third person as well. Like,
Yeah, from that sense, like what that master said, Shiva comes in a little bit funny today.
Yeah, exactly.
As in like yourself as in third person, right? It's a bit reacted a bit funny.
Yeah, I reacted a bit funny today.
That's a bit strange,
Yeah.
but okay, I won't do that next
Jason's
time.
doing this. Jason's concerned about that.
Yeah.
You create a distance. You try to abide in the Atman or the self, and you try to make that distance between you and the jiva, the persona system. Like, why is Jason concerned about this? You're observing it. Your awareness is more attuned to its true nature, as opposed being caught in this, this energy of the jiva, which makes us then worry and fret about certain things that don't need to be concerned about.
Yeah, having just that healthy distance from jiva itself is a great practice to have non-attachment with that identity, like so-called identity as a persona, right? And naturally, it'll build that detachment from your jiva.
Yeah. Because your pure awareness is commingled with the jiva.
Yes.
It's by default, or by accident, I should say, because of the socialization process. When you had a childlike mind, that's just the Atman experiencing the beauty of life. But then once you start going to school, or once you start getting indoctrinated by your parents or your society and this and that, then you create this artificial persona.
Yeah.
And so your pure awareness then becomes entangled with that, and then you can't see reality in its true state. So, and the point of spiritual practice is to extract that pull that back, so you can see, oh wait, that's a construct, that thing, that's an artificial identity.
Yes.
It's not the identity. The identity is Tao or Brahman or whatever. It's not really an identity, but if we were to use it in that sense, right? Like,
in practicing that distancing with your own jiva also gives you an idea that how you have been acting. Like sometimes, have I been acting like this? A lot of the time, you might perceive yourself quite childish or selfish, or come from very not understanding mind, the kind of thing. So having that healthy distance instantly kind of dissolves that quality, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It is a great practice, and that's why Nisargadatta recommended it, and it works. It really works, like you said. But you got to be sincere, like you said before. We'll be serious about some things, but not serious about what we should be serious about, and so to speak. I'm not saying we should be serious about that, but sincere about it.
Yeah, sorry. I think when things pop up in life that are kind of out of our control, that then we instantly take it serious, I think, because we become anxious, because it is out of our control, out of our hands. So we start to worry, and we start to be very serious about it, and that worry and seriousness becomes real. I think you solidify the situation to yourself, basically. But when you if you can let go of that sort of situation, in a sense that you're trying to control it, but just let it let it just be. It's there, but let it just sort it out itself. But then what we can control is to, again, look within ourselves to distance from that reaction. Right?
Definitely. Don't take it personally.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't take it personally.
That's it.
It's not personal, actually.
Yes.
It's not. And as you said, all of these concerns and that, we don't really have to be engaged in it, because it's not ours, we try to avoid being patient as much as possible because we need to control the reality. We need to have things immediately as they are. Sometimes you actually need to wait and then wait even more. And nothing frustrates the jiva more than that, because the jiva needs it done now,
Yes.
not tomorrow or the next day or next year.
Yeah.
It needs to happen now.
Because constantly thinking about the future. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Where the Atman it's not time bound. So you can just be ever present, and this will pass. Whatever experience it is, you won't be perturbed by it. You'll have distance from it.
Yeah.
And that's where that practice of Maharaj actually is beneficial for people. So,
Yeah.
All right, guys, we hope you enjoyed. Remember, life isn't serious, and we'll see you guys next time.